I've probably made too many videos on this car at this point. But hey, welcome to another one. This is the most impulsive and disastrous vehicle purchase I have made in my entire life, and it has been 3 years since I bit the bullet on this 2004 Land Rover Freelander V6 for $950, all of which was pretty much wasted the instant that I handed it over. But oh well, we're stuck with it now. In the United States at least, the Freelander is super rare. You only see one outside of the junkyard about once a year, maybe once every 2 years, and there's a very good reason for that. It lies underneath there. The Rover K Series V6, like I've said multiple times, is the worst modern vehicle engine that has been put into anything. And in the United States, the only flavor that we got the K Series V6, or any Rover K Series engine in fact, was the Freelander. And the Freelander sold reasonably well. It came to the States in 2001, I believe, sold something like 15,000, 16,000 units in its first year. And from that point on, when people started to realize, here's the graph that I'm visualizing of the sales, people started to realize the reliability burden that taking on a small Land Rover was, and the sales kind of, they dropped off to pretty much nothing by the end of the Freelander one cycle, or at least that's what I think, because 99% of the Freelanders that I ever see are pre-facelift ones with that horrible, disgusting COVID face mask, Tonka plastic looking front end, which was a complete, utter disaster, at least to me. There is way too much gray plastic on the front of a pre-facelift Freelander that it's surprising that they actually looked at that design and thought, "Oi mate, yes of course, that looks great. Let's go down to the pub for a cup of tea, cheerio," whatever else British people say. Basically, they put it on the market even with that disgusting look on its face, and somehow it made into the dealerships and onto people's driveways. In 2004, the Freelander dropped a facelift. It wasn't just the outside that was cleaned up and much improved, but it was also the interior. Gone are the days of flat door panels like the early Freelanders and a whole Isuzu rodeo vibe on the inside, and they actually put in some effort to make the interior look nice. But by the time that was hitting dealerships, I think the secret was probably out about the reliability and the difficulties of ownership and maintenance and things like that. Again, this K Series V6 is a horrible, horrible engine, unless if it's hooked up to an exhaust and it's muffled and quiet and doesn't sound like a diseased tractor, then it is a good luxury car, smooth engine when it works. But if it never works, that sort of defeats the point. It clearly wasn't designed very well before it was put out onto the market, especially the head gaskets, which were made from chocolate. Don't believe me? Well, this car has gone through 3 sets of head gaskets. Anyone notice how Doug DeMuro counts like this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Does that bother anybody else? Don't regular people just do that? Nevertheless, this car has had 3 head gasket replacements in the last 20,000 miles. First one was at 110,000 miles under the previous owner, who probably fixed it over a course of 2 years because of how surprisingly difficult it is to actually do this job. And he drove it for 17,000 miles until the head gasket went again. Now, likely in a state of denial, he replaced the radiator, the cooling fan, the coolant bottle, pretty much the entire cooling system, hoping that that would solve the problem, and it didn't solve the problem. And hey, that's where I entered the equation and handed over $950 not knowing what I was doing because I didn't do my research. And that is the epitome of a bad impulsive buy. Always do your research, kids, before you buy a car, okay? Because you could end up like me. So 127,000 miles, April 8th, 2020 is when I purchased this thing in Provo, which is about a 45-minute drive from where I was living at the time in Cottonwood Heights, Utah. I purchased it with a blown head gasket again, and also it had a blown hose in the V of the engine, the hose that goes just out of the thermostat. I sort of knew what I was getting into. I came equipped with a full weapons case of 4 or 5 gallons of water, and pretty much as soon as I poured the water in, it just hemorrhaged it back out like a nice little Niagara Falls in there. Not much water was actually making it into the engine of the car. And I attempted to drive it home from Provo, which is supposed to be a 45-minute drive thereabouts. And that ended up taking me about 12 hours and probably 14, 15 breakdowns and a phone call to my dad, who came to rescue. And yeah, he wasn't happy, understandably. So we got it home. The rest is quite well detailed. Replaced the head gasket. That took about 8 months from buying the car to actually getting it on the road, because there was another certain white Discovery in the way that had to get a head gasket replacement first. And on a Rover V8 like that, it takes about maybe a weekend. Not a hard job at all. On this, it took probably 5 months of blood, sweat, and swear words to get this thing to a running state. But we did, polished the paint, made it look really good. Still had an exhaust leak, was still pretty noisy, but I got to drive it around with no air conditioning for about 8-9 months and 3,000 miles until it started overheating again. The story goes, I was dealing with some car problems. This car was having overheating problems. The cooling fan wasn't working. This car, when you started it, was having a misfire problem, not running very well, but it would smooth out eventually. So this car wasn't running very well. That car was overheating. That's the gist of it. I replaced one of the ignition coils on this, which I believed solved the problem, but I noticed that the air conditioning had leaked out again. But at least I'd solved the misfire, the weird starting problem, so it was fine. It wasn't fine. I went to McDonald's, was in the drive-thru of McDonald's, got my food, thinking, cool, now I get to go home, finally have one of my cars back home, don't have to borrow one of my dad's. And I'm just starting to drive out of the drive-thru, and I look down and I see my temperature is pegged into the red, and I thought, great. So I parked in a Whole Foods, ate my lunch there. That was fun. Called my dad and I said, all right, so I've got good news, bad news, and really bad news on the Freelander. Good news is the misfire's fixed. It wasn't. The misfire came back later. Bad news is the air conditioning's leaked out. Not a big deal. Really bad news, I am sitting in the Whole Foods parking lot, the car overheated. And it appeared to be completely fine after that. Wasn't showing any overheating symptoms, wasn't leaking coolant. Eventually got brave, decided to take it back home after I'd taken it on a couple test drives. Thought it was just a weird, random problem that happened. I drove it for a couple days, maybe a week, and it overheated again. That's when the overheating was back in full force, and we got it back home and found out that just 3,000 miles later, the head gasket was gone again. That's where this video came about, and we took the heads off, you may remember, and found that the heads were cracked. I wrote a poem, actually. It took some time, but we are now halfway. So we took the cylinder heads to get milled one day. Instead of finishing, it was good news we now lacked, as they told us the cylinder heads are actually cracked. It's sad to hear, since this job really sucked, especially now that we know the engine is So we got a whole new set of cylinder heads from Florida, which kind of amazing that you can find Rover K-Series V6 cylinder heads refurbished anywhere in the US right now, when this is the only car that had it and you never see them. So we got that job all done. Even got the exhaust welded up by my dad's cousin Randy. Thank you again. Polished it, made the paint all nice again, because this red looks really good. It looks beautiful actually when it's in good condition. The problem is, just like the car, it's great when it works, but it never works, so what's the point? So the paint fades and peels on the clear coat like crazy, as you can see. But when it's new and polished and nice, then it looks amazing. So we got all of that done, and then I took it on a small off-road road trip to the Uintas for my brother's bachelor party, which is probably my favorite video that I did last year and my favorite video that I filmed on this car easily. And it was around that time in 3 years of owning this car that the ownership experience really peaked for me. It was quiet and reliable. The air conditioning was fixed and working. It wasn't overheating. I took it off-road and it impressed everybody at the bachelor party, nobody thought that over the rocks, yes, in the video, it looks undramatic, but trust me, 18-inch wheels on this thing at the time, driving it through a rocky path, knowing its reputation and not knowing how far it was to the actual campsite was definitely giving me a few early gray hairs. And we made it, and everybody was amazed with this car. And again, it was quiet, it was smooth, it was running perfectly, air conditioning was working, everything was working, and it was like in perfect condition. Even the paint was amazing too. In perfect condition, so it probably at that moment was worth about $2,000. I got it back home, just completely amazed with it, felt so happy, put that video up, but it wasn't perfect. I was still getting some stressful and scary noises, especially coming from the drive shaft or the center viscous coupling thing that is always a problem on these cars. Full steering lock, there was a really bad knocking noise and I really couldn't tell what corner it was coming from. And after first starting it and putting it in drive, it would clunk a little and then go, almost like it was hesitating, like something was catching. That problem eventually got us worried enough to the point where we did the European Freelander thing that a lot of people tend to do, and we took the drive shaft out and essentially rendered it front wheel drive, which you can do on a Freelander totally fine because it's one of those all-wheel drive systems that sends power to the front wheels all the time, but when it detects the rear wheels are slipping, then it sends some to the back. I believe that's how it works. So since they're not always connected in one, it's not always sending power to all four wheels, you can actually do that. And the benefits to doing that are better gas mileage. I was getting like 20 miles per gallon when before I was getting around 15, which in a 2.5 liter V6, I don't care what kind of aerodynamics the car has, it could be shaped like a brick. It pretty much is. Doesn't really make much sense. That's the least of this car's problems. We took that out, rendered it front wheel drive, and it was okay. It was still running and driving just fine, but having the capability taken out of it was a little bit frustrating after I'd just gone on that awesome off-road trip that I was so happy about. Later, we did end up getting an entire new drive shaft, new U-joints, viscous coupling. We replaced everything that we thought was wrong with it, but it didn't really fix the problem. Still doesn't like tight turns, and it still catches when I first drive the car away after starting it. But just as long as it doesn't break off and launch underneath the car, sending the car on its roof and killing me, it's not a big deal, so I don't really mind. I've just learned to live with it. And then one summer night, I'm driving home from a long day at work in my BMW, and this happened. I hit a deer. That was really sad. Took this car back home, and the next morning, I'm preparing for my whole video thing where I'm gonna stand in front of the camera, say, yeah, I crashed my BMW, I don't know what's gonna happen with it. Putting everything in this car, and I turn around to grab my bag, right? Turn around and I see my back window rolling down on its own. And we still don't know what's wrong with it. It's some sort of electrical problem, not the motor, not the regulator, and it's not a simple switch relay problem that we have to deal with. There's some sort of electrical gremlin back there that caused the window to just stop working. To solve this problem temporarily, so I can still use the window, we removed the motor, so now it's just manual. You can move it up and down with your hands, which is nice except for two things. Number one, if I go over a bump too hard in this car, the rear window just opens. If I don't want to suffocate on exhaust fumes coming into the cabin, I have to stop the car wherever I am, get out, shut the window, and then get back in and continue my journey. Number two, it's not exactly secure. I can lock this car perfectly fine, primes the alarm system, everything, all the doors lock, including that back door. But that window, if you can fit your fingers into those creases, then you can just push the window down, help yourself to all my belongings. You know, I'm so glad I spent my life savings on this laptop here, and it's the laptop that I've always dreamed of. Just gonna throw it back here. Ignore that. It's reasonably safe right there. I'm just gonna put it there. I'm sure nobody's gonna happen themselves upon this car and steal my laptop or anything. That would really suck. Yep, locked. Couple setbacks again, front wheel drive, rear window not working. Not the end of the world. I still had a usable car, 2 usable cars actually, this and the WRX at the time. And this is where we left off on the last update of this car, my 2022 fleet update, where I said, yeah, it's front wheel drive, but we're gonna fix it. Hopefully get some off-road mods, some better tires that are more suitable for off-road driving, and cool things like headlight guards and a roof rack and a roof light, all that cool stuff. And that's where we left off. It ended up being the first winter, most of it, that I was actually able to drive this car, seeing as the tires that I had at the time on those big 18-inch wheels were all-season tires that were quite worn, not very good. It ended up being okay in the snow. It could get you to where you needed to go as long as you didn't go up any steep hills and large blizzards or anything like that. So the snow car of choice was still the all-wheel drive BMW with true snow tires. Over the winter, the exhaust leak came back in full force, so here for yourself. Oh yeah, sounds good, doesn't it? No. So yeah, the exhaust leak over the winter came back in full force, but not a big deal. It is kind of a big deal actually. It's embarrassing, it's annoying, it's loud, and sometimes a loud car is a good thing. It sounds good, it puts a smile on your face. This definitely doesn't, because it sounds like a diseased tractor. I was finally able to put these rims to good use because I got some nice tires for it. Now, these tires, like I said, I was gonna get better tires for off-road use. These tires have much thicker sidewall because they're on 16-inch wheels rather than 18-inch wheels. But here's the thing, I don't look like a failed drug dealer anymore. Those 18-inch wheels were ridiculous, the same size wheels as my dad has on his Range Rover, okay? I don't wanna look like I'm driving in a failed version of Dub City with my broken down Freelander, but at least it has Rams on it. No, that's not the look that I like. And these new wheels, I mean, can you argue? They look so much better in my mind than the 18s before. But despite the fact that I gifted this car some new wheels and completely cleaned the interior, vacuumed it out, wiped off every surface, made it look really nice on the inside, this car still had to show its true colors. The day that I filmed the YouTube short video where I'm pushing snow off of it, and then I drove it along this road down here, slammed on the brakes so all the snow satisfyingly just slid off the front of the car. Later that night, I was driving to visit my parents, got within a couple blocks, which was nice. I guess it's better that I got close to home. And I looked down and I saw the temperature was pegged in the red again. And parked it, saw the coolant bottle was bubbling and trying to overflow. And I thought, if this is the head gasket, I am 100% done with this car. I am not doing that job again, and I'm going to sell it on to the next idiot who doesn't know what they're getting into. Cut to the 3-month-long process of trying to figure out what's wrong with this car, thinking in my head that it's going to be the head gasket. There's no point in fixing this car anymore because the symptoms were the exact same. It overheated once and then completely pretended like nothing was wrong after that, before Tyler, the new and reasonably happy LR4 owner, and I worked out with the help of his thermal camera what's actually wrong with this car. Well, thanks, good looking. Here I am in the winter, slightly younger, shorter hair probably, and hopefully a lot more unhappy. I'm not trying to jump to the worst possible conclusion here, but considering the fact that this car has gone through 3 sets of head gaskets in the last 30,000 miles, and it seems like the symptoms are almost exactly the same as before when it blew that second set and the heads ended up being cracked and blah, blah, blah. The only slight difference was a small stream of coolant coming out from the bottom. So maybe that means that a hose came off or something, but I don't know. Considering my history with this car, I'm not really optimistic, but we're gonna find out. Wrenching on my favorite engine. I love this thing. I guess this is what I get for putting a comedic, unreliable, touting British plate on the front of the car. I guess this is the car paying me back for giving it public humiliation. This is held on with a rubber strap. That's weird. Why won't you come off, bro? Ah, there we go. Yummy. Well, let's check for milkshake. There isn't any, but that doesn't mean that there won't be any in the oil pan too. Okay, well, it's in the garage now.
You should comment on the coolant underneath it, but then say it's not this car's fault because it's already empty. Oh, there's a flood. You didn't see the back. There's a huge flood. It's going out the back of the garage.
Yeah. It's starting to feel a little bit like an abusive relationship at this point. So I might need counseling pretty soon or something like that. But yeah, we're gonna put some of this all too familiar coolant into it, see where it goes. What are we thinking, thermostat or head gasket?
See where it comes out. I don't know.
Two of them, right?
We'll just wait and see. All right, let's dump it in.
It's already warm.
Yeah,
because it's hot water.
It was hot water.
It's already overheating. Not even in the car yet.
Do you need the funnel or can you hit it?
I got it.
Not that you wouldn't want to spill on this garage floor.
I could do it.
Try and get some in the hole.
Hey, I got it. I'm so good at this now. There's been plenty of practice like that.
Sure. It's going to suck it in as soon as we start it anyway, so. I'm not sure why I'm putting that up since the exhaust doesn't come out the back.
Yeah, it comes out everywhere else. Hear that glorious V6.
Here it comes, tractor mode.
Woo! Doesn't appear to be going anywhere or doing anything.
It's smoking.
Smoking?
Uh-huh. That's oil though, not coolant.
Ah, yes. Oil. Let's hope that it's not a mixture of both.
Is it taking it yet?
What?
Did it take any coolant?
No.
I'm gonna rev it a little.
Nice.
Strangely, the only light on the dash that is not on is the check engine light.
Still nothing. Was it overheating at all?
No, it's just sitting there, just running like normal, like nothing's wrong.
Do we need to drive it?
That's what I'm thinking. Maybe it needs to go for a drive.
Hoon it. Watching the temperature gauge like a hawk. I know it's just gonna go from totally fine to DEFCON 1 in the blink of an eye, because that's what this car always does. So I'm looking at the temperature gauge more than I am the actual road in front of me, so God, this car sounds so... Try to drive it a little bit harder. Literally nothing. It's just holding temperature like there's nothing wrong with it. And it's not like it was out of coolant, because it was overflowing and bubbling and acting like the car is about to go Apollo 13 on me. Is the bottle cracked or?
I'm wondering, hand me a paper towel. Turn it off. Yeah, the drip was happening back here, which means it was just running down the inside, and then
So it's just
from the bottle, it overflowed the bottle. But why?
Everybody have a good week. Mine was pretty good. It's been all right. Except for this.
I don't know what's going on.
I don't know. I don't think it's the thermostat though.
I don't either, because it's hot.
I think I don't know. It's just doing the exact same thing as it did
Yeah, it's not full of diarrhea though.
Yeah, but
Yet.
it was a slow, it overheated that one day in the McDonald's drive-thru. Drove it home, then it seemed fine after a while, so I drove it all the way back to my apartment. It was totally fine, didn't overheat at all. It was a couple times that I remember taking it to Sunset Coffee, which is like a 2-mile drive, and it just wouldn't, it just kept overheating, and I don't know. It just seems like the exact same way. It's just started slow. So with some diagnosing from me and my dad, we found out that after driving this car for a while and letting the car warm up, the upper radiator hose was hot, but the lower radiator hose was cold, which means that it wasn't getting any hot coolant through it, so coolant wasn't flowing the way it was supposed to. We arrived on, it might be the thermostat actually, and not the head gasket, that mindset. So we replaced the thermostat, and it didn't do anything. That lower radiator hose was still cold. For 3 whole months, we tried to figure out what's actually wrong with this car, but in reality, we were just checking off all the other problems it could be before we finally would arrive on what we felt in our hearts was the actual problem, which was the all problematic head gaskets again. This is gonna help us find out if there's a head gasket leak. If this fluid turns yellow, then that means this car is done.
Blue.
Soon to be yellow, probably.
Well, let's try it, I guess.
Down there, right?
It says to do it for 60 seconds. Do you want to be in charge of timing it on your watch?
Okay.
Can you go rev the engine just a little bit?
Ready?
Yeah.
Still a bit possible.
Okay, turn it off.
Well,
Blue. Uh-oh, lid. Oh, that's as blue as it blue can be. All right, well, it says to dispose of this according to local environmental regulations.
oh, this car.
Well, I'm not sure what to do.
So do we think it's not a head gasket anymore, or is that not ruled out?
Well, if this stuff works, then you'd think that would rule it out, right? It couldn't have just gotten low on coolant enough to overheat, could it?
I don't think so, because it was all coming back up through there and overflowing.
Even when it overheated?
Yeah, when it overheated, yeah. The other night, like I pulled it into the driveway, opened the hood, and I saw this was bubbling like crazy.
With the car on or off?
With it off. I'm pretty sure it was doing it with it on, because you can
Yeah.
hear it.
But when it's...
When I turned it off, it was still doing it for a little bit.
Okay, so when the car's running and you get bubbling up through there, that can mean that there's a leak because it's pushing gas back in there, which is the most likely thing. But if you seal the coolant, the water, into a sealed system and run it, it will not boil, even though it reaches 212 degrees.
Yeah.
Because of the pressure. The pressure keeps it from boiling, and it raises the boiling point. I think it does the same thing with coolant, but so the question is, if for example the cap was bad, would it boil in there because of no pressure, and cause it to overheat like you saw? It's possible, but I'm not sure.
Wouldn't it overheat
well.
again after I drove it today?
Well, maybe.
Because
you'd think, but
drove
maybe
it through
you
these
didn't
neighborhoods
drive it
kinda
enough.
hard.
Maybe it just didn't drive it enough. Or have we ever looked at the radiator?
I know it had a new radiator before we bought it, or before I bought it.
So the radiator's not plugged or anything. It seems like it's not really under great pressure, but it could be. That could make a difference.
It's been 4,000 miles since we buttoned up that last head gasket fix, and before that, it lasted 3,000 miles. I had definitely been eyeballing that temperature gauge like a hawk for the past 1,000, 2,000 miles in this thing, because I was worried that it's been 3,000 miles. That's how long it lasted before. Now we're in uncharted territory. Thankfully, Tyler has a thermal camera. I roped him into working on this car with me, and he brought his thermal camera over and pointed it at the radiator after I had been driving it pretty hard for about 15 minutes. He pointed it at the radiator and saw that only the top corner of it was getting any coolant at all. So he concluded, and I agreed with him because it made sense with all the symptoms that I had been experiencing.
Have we ever looked at the radiator? So the radiator's not plugged or anything. You know, that could make a difference.
We concluded that the radiator actually must be clogged. So here's a bit of the process of fixing that. First, I had to get the car started, which it had been sitting for 2 months. The battery was dead, and when we jump started it, it wasn't exactly keen on the idea of ending back in my dad's garage. So we pulled it back in the garage, hooked up hoses and things to it, some air compressors and a bunch of other cool stuff, and got the radiator to puke up all that was clogged up in it, which holding the hose over a bucket while the car throws up like as Tyler gives it bursts of compressed air did feel like I was at a college party, you know, how you hold somebody's hair up as they are bent over the toilet and it's a bad night. Yeah, that's exactly what it felt for me. After we did that, put everything all back together, hoses back on and everything, we drove it around a couple blocks, ran it for about an hour. Amazingly, the air conditioning still works on it, which is a miracle for me, to be honest. On the thermal camera, we got the radiator from looking like this to looking like this. The coolant level in the bottle dropped as it took it into the cooling system. All the hoses were hot. The entire cooling system was regulating at about 180 degrees. The bottle wasn't bubbling. A new bottle actually, which we replaced because the last one cracked itself when I overheated it, I presume. Everything right now seems to be regulating the way it's supposed to be. Now that's a long update with this car, but this car, of course, is never short on entertainment and pain and suffering. But fingers crossed, I literally just drove this back home about 10-15 miles last night. It should be good now. This update video is about 2 months later than it was supposed to be because I was trying to get the car back on the road, or at least figure out what's wrong with it, what the plan is to continue, so I could actually stand here in front of my camera and tell you what the update is on this car. So yeah, the update is late and I'm sorry about that. At least right now, the car is fine. I need some wood to knock on. Knock on wood. And so yeah, it still sounds like a sick tractor. Every window behind these two front driver and passenger windows doesn't roll down or roll up like it's supposed to, including the sunroof. That back door and back window is a continual problem that's gonna continue. It's a continual problem that's gonna continue. That back window electrical gremlin is a continual problem, and eventually, hopefully, we can figure out what's wrong. If you're a British Freelander owner and you know what's going on with my rear window, first of all, I am sorry for talking trash on your car. It's lovely, mate, and I really do love it. Can you please tell me what's wrong so I can figure it out, please? It's really annoying. The exhaust leak will be fixed, but this car has to earn that with me. If it doesn't slip up once, especially in terms of the cooling system, if it doesn't slip up at all, then it'll get a completely fixed exhaust. Maybe a new exhaust, maybe something out of the junkyard. Freelanders are even getting rare out there at this point, but hopefully we can get a new exhaust, fix the windows, and I've got some really cool headlight guards that are gonna go on this car hopefully pretty soon, and that'll look really awesome. And if it continues to be reliable and we fix that exhaust leak and everything's good, then We'll get a roof bar, roof rack, all that stuff, but don't hold your breath quite yet. Driving this car home last night after 3 months of not driving it, I forgot about everything I love about it. The comfortable ride, the high driving position, how easy it is to drive, how spacious and nice it is on the interior, and you know that you're driving something rare and interesting. So yeah, with that, I'm gonna end the video right there. I wanna thank everybody for watching. I'm sure there'll be another update video on this car sooner than there should be one, because it's my Freelander. There's always something with it. Stay tuned till the next video. Next update video is gonna be the 4-year update on my BMW. I can't believe I've owned this thing for almost 4 years. It's been amazing. So stay tuned for that update video. Stay tuned for the next breakdown video, and stay tuned for the 2023 fleet update video, which should be out in 2 or 3 months, and that'll be a fun video to do. So thanks everybody for watching. Everybody have an awesome day. Bye-bye.